So, welcome back, everyone, to another Israel Insights webinar. This is an unusual webinar in two respects. The first and less exciting is the fact that I'm in Portland, Oregon today, participating in a Pacific Northwest regional conference of university leaders and administrators around the theme of combating anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias. So I'm away from sunny Palo Alto and here in rainy and cold Portland, but it's for a good reason. And the much more important reason why this is an unusual Israel Insights webinars is that we have Masua Sagiv with us coming in from Jerusalem. I think, Masua, you were lucky in Jerusalem last night because your sleep was only interrupted 3 or 4 times. For most Israelis, they've been up 5 or 6 times overnight. And it was Yonit Levy who a couple of days ago said that it feels in Israel right now like everybody has a newborn baby. And so everybody's sleep deprived. But you still have to get up in the morning and go to work and take care of the kids. So it's a bit crazy, and we're all sleep deprived. But we're very proud and very honored to have Dr. Masua Sagiv with us for a discussion that we originally thought would focus on the state of Israeli democracy and this kind of ongoing set of tension and constitutional questions in Israel. But given the war situation, I'm sure we'll also want to ask Masua about both her experience with the war, but also how this war is likely to affect Israeli politics in an election year. So let's do it this way. I will briefly introduce Dr. Masua Sagiv. We'll begin with a conversation about the current situation in Israel, and then hopefully we'll be able to transition into a discussion about the state of Israeli democracy. This is a live event. It is being recorded, but it's a live event. So in the event that there are air raid sirens going off, we'll probably hear them through Masua's Zoom, and Masua will have to go and shelter. What we will do then, if Masua has to go shelter, it will be about a 10-minute break because
it depends. 10-15 minute break.
It could be 10 or 15 minutes. So we don't want to waste that time. And so anybody who has any questions about the war or any other issue that they would like to pose to me, you can just write your question in the Q&A tab, and we'll do a Ask Amichai Anything mini session, and then hopefully we'll go back to Masua. Okay, so thank you everyone for your patience. Dr. Masua Sagiv is senior faculty at the Shalom Hartman Institute and a senior fellow at the Helen Diller Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies at UC Berkeley School of Law. Masua is a constitutional lawyer, and she's an analyst of Israeli political culture. She works on Arab-Jewish coexistence in Israel, religion and gender, religion and state, and Jewish peoplehood. And her scholarly work explores the role of law, state actors, and civil society organizations in promoting social change and the development of contemporary Judaism in Israel. Her recently published book, Radical Conservatism, published with Carmel in 2024, examines the use of law in the Halachic Feminist struggle in Israel. So, Masua, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, let's begin with you and your family, and give us an update of how are you? What are your days and nights looking like these?
I think things have
Masua,
changed.
can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. I think your line wasn't optimum.
Okay.
Um, I think there was a change between last week and this week, but our days are very much around being close to shelter. All of our kids are home. We live in the fourth floor, so every time there's a siren, we have to run down to the bomb shelter. So down and up. There are beautiful moments in this because we have a very there's the culture of the neighbors and the people who come in to the bomb shelter, and this shared resilience, if you will. There are definitely down points. It the situation doesn't just structure your day, but it also affects your body, your heart, your breathing, your children's lives in a very concrete way. Um, Considering, I think we're beseder gamur, you know, we're okay, we're fine.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I'm following the news in Israel and television. You see people at the beach, you see people at restaurants and cafes, essentially under rocket fire. Luckily, the number of rockets and drones fired at Israel this time is substantially smaller than it was in previous rounds in June, and certainly the two major salvos that we experienced in April 2025, and then again in October. Part of that has to do with the fact that Iran is now shooting in every possible direction. And our hearts go out, especially to our friends in the Gulf, in the UAE, and elsewhere. They've received three times the number of rockets that have been fired on us, and we are better protected in Israel than the Emiratis or the Bahrainis, for example. Masua, one of the things that really is striking is just the different narratives, the very, very different narratives. It's almost day and night between the way that Israelis are thinking about this war and the way that it's portrayed in the mainstream media in the United States. I mean, when we sort of look at the stats, at the moment, at least, the majority of Americans oppose this war. They don't understand the reason for it. Some of them feel the President Trump has kind of reneged on an electoral promise not to drag America into wars. What's the thinking in Israel, and what do public opinion polls tell us about Israeli attitudes towards this war with Iran?
So it's almost in some ways it's almost like a mirror image, and in others there are shared themes, I would say. Over 80% of Israelis are supporting this war. This is poll after poll. It is overwhelming support. It's not necessarily support in how the war is waged, but it is, as opposed to the perception that sees this war as an independent, isolated war. For Israelis, we have been fighting Iran for 2.5 years, if not more than that, and it's not. It's just that it's a continuation of almost an inevitable war, a war of self-defense, an existential threat. There are currently 450 kilograms of enriched uranium that can amount very easily to 11 atomic bombs. And I think that the most important thing, just in the psyche of Israelis, is that ever since October 7th, when someone tells us, we want you dead and we're going to do everything we can in order to do that, we just believe them. And I get why all the reason why it causes a conflict between, we feel under existential threat and Americans do not feel like existential threat, and then the contradiction between war of necessity and war of choice is very, very harsh in a sense. There is a lot of questions in Israel around how this will end. What are the goals? Because the goals are not that clear, as opposed to, I know that the American public is saying that Trump is not selling this war, but but if you compare it to what we get, we're not. No one speaks with us. Our prime minister is interviewing at Fox News, but is not interviewing at all, barely issues any statements. So the Israeli public doesn't really get any answers, doesn't really get the goal. We know what the goal is in general, but do we go for a regime change or not? Sometimes we hear conflicting answers. What's the exit strategy? Which, by the way, I'm not necessarily sure that I need to know what the exit strategy at day 10 or day 11. But there is I would say maybe a sense of suspicion, especially when it's not just the war going on. We still have laws that are being promoted that are not exactly war related. We have budgets that are being promoted that are not exactly war related. We have we'll talk about that, I hope, at some point. We have the pardon of Netanyahu that is up in the headlines again. So there is kind of like a wariness where we know the war is important and just, and there is an existential threat, but something feels iffy, if you will.
That's very interesting. You know, this connection between waging a war against an enemy that has built a ring of fire
Yep,
around
yep.
Israel, that has been, describing Israel as a cancer that needs to be removed. Khomeini famously described Israel as a one bomb state. And so Israelis have, I think, a very visceral sense of the threat and the need to remove the threat, and an understanding that if this regime is at the very least degraded and destabilized, we will be living in an entirely different and most likely strategically far more benign regional environment for Israel. But that is coupled with uncertainty. Israelis are very aware that how you enter a war, you never really know how you exit from it, and you know that war is the realm of the uncertain, and there will be unintended consequences. So there is that element. But then you introduce, I think, an element and a dimension that is less well understood, and that is that under the cover, if you like, of a pursuit of a strategy of dismantlement of the axis of resistance, which Israelis support, there is a parallel process of internal dismantlement of
Yes.
some of the checks and balances on executive power, and these two processes are happening in parallel. And in a way, the foreign policy strategy and in many respects necessary successes are providing fuel for domestic processes of dismantlement, which are much more controversial and many would argue, I would argue, very dangerous for the longer term coherence and resilience of Israeli society and Israeli democracy. So let's unpack
In a way, I'll just say
that a
on
little
this,
bit.
in
Yeah.
a way, um, in a sense, we we are defined, Israelis are defined at the moment by being October 8th Israelis and being October 6th Israelis at the same time. We are October 8th Israelis in the sense that we are not going to accept anymore having a sword over our head that we know that will strike at any moment. And at the same time, we still haven't managed to overcome the deep, deep distrust, um, um, justified distrust to a lot of to a large extent, um, and the political divide that we have in Israel.
Yeah, and those two things are happening in parallel, but the internal tends to be invisible for people who are outside of Israel. There is this kind of myopia. I think the foreign policy and the war side tends to be conducted in English, as you've said, and is very accessible to international audiences. And of course, it's very dramatic and very consequential. We don't want to belittle its importance, but it also creates a kind of blindness and a sidelining of what are crucial domestic Israeli debates and challenges. So let's begin to explore those internal issues. So I think it's fair to say that the war has certainly changed the internal political dynamics. I would say perhaps in two main levels, or two different and related domains. One is that it's clear that this war and the outcome of this war will now play a central role in the electoral campaigns and the outcome of the election that is expected and is legally required to take place before October 27th, 2026 under Israeli law. Clearly, Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping, perhaps even gambling, that he will be able to tell a story of, we took a blow on October 7th, but since then, look what we've done. Hezbollah is gone, Hamas is gone, Assad in Syria is gone, and now we took out Khomeini, and perhaps by the time we reach the end of this summer, we could be looking at a very different Iran and a much improved geopolitical situation for Israel. So that will be kind of to Netanyahu's credit, and may affect the outcome of the elections. I certainly believe that's his hope, and at the same time, the war has changed the nature of popular protests in Israel. Before October 7th, we had these massive regular protests week after week, hundreds of thousands of people in the street protesting the judicial overall agenda of this government. Clearly, you can't do that under conditions of war, and so the protest movement has also had to adapt and has had to change. And I think the protest movement now is very much focused on the upcoming elections, right? So could you tell us a little bit about those two sets of dynamics, Masua, and how this war is affecting preparations for the elections?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, I think I agree with you completely. Netanyahu is hopeful that he comes to this election at either, I assume, in June or in September, after a successful Iran war or operation, depends on how you want to call it. I suspect he also wants to be after the decision around the pardon, which I think will get there very, very soon, finally. And right now we see that the polls are, Netanyahu is strengthened at the polls, but at the expense of his other of the other parties in his bloc, and not at the expense of the opposition. So still we see that even though in polls Netanyahu is getting stronger, we still see that his coalition, or the current coalition as it is right now, does not look as if it will be capable of forming a new government after the election. So that's number one. Number two is how the war is affecting all of this. I think there's something very telling if we look at the story of last night. Because last night, two things happened in parallel. On the war front, it was a very, very difficult night. meaning we had launch after launch after launch from Iran. People would go up and down and up and down to their bomb shelters. And it felt very, very harsh. Thank God no one got hurt because people are they know we know what to do already. That night also, something internal, very, very interesting happened. Number one is Netanyahu and Smotrich, the Secretary of Treasury, are issuing a statement, are declaring that they are putting aside for now the enlistment, the Haredi ultra-Orthodox enlistment bill that they have been working on for the past 2 years. They're not going to promote it, and instead, what they're doing is that basically the trade-off is transferring substantial budgets to the ultra-Orthodox parties that threatened throughout the last time that if the enlistment bill will not pass, they are trumping or dismantling the government. And what happened is that last night, while people were down and up and down and up to the bomb shelter, 6 billion shekels were transferred to an array of goals that are not related to the war, that are not encouraging the effective economic growth of Israel, that are basically strengthening the system of the ultra-Orthodox lifestyle of not being productive and really preventing any way for young ultra-Orthodox people to be able to live and leave and exit these institutions and system. And people were watching because we were all awake throughout the night. And people are watching and it was throughout the night. It was mamash at the middle of the night. You see these budgets are being transferred and people are watching while they're running up and down the stairs. And I think that this is a good reflection of the two narratives, two possible narratives that these coming elections could be based on. Because we thought it might be about the responsibility and accountability of October 7th and the horrible loss and the war and all of this. But I feel like last night was a very good reflection of the things that bother a lot of Israelis, and it doesn't really matter if they voted for this government or not.
That's fascinating, and the transfer of these billions and billions of shekels is happening exactly at the time when the Israeli public is being told we're cutting funding for healthcare, we're cutting funding for education, except
ultra the board cut because of the war, due to the war.
Due to the war, and as everybody understands that tens of billions of dollars are going to have to be added to the defense budget of Israel. Every public service is being cut. Investment in infrastructure is being cut. Investment in health and education is being cut. But billions of shekels are being transferred to the ultra-Orthodox parties in order to make sure that they stay within the coalition and that, crucially, they vote for the budget, which has to pass the Knesset vote by March 31st. Otherwise, the government falls and we go to elections. So Netanyahu, as we can see, is fighting Iran and at the same time maintaining his coalition and making sure that we will go to elections when he wants us to go to elections. Is willing to create, these transfers that I think is fair to say most Israelis kind of look at this and shake their head. There's another
even ironic of all of this is that there was also a cut to the rehabilitation of the North from this war, that it took about 2 years to actually establish and create the institution that is in charge of rehabilitation. Even now, as people are in their shelters, this budget is being cut. It was very harsh.
Yeah. And we should add that as part of the statement made by Bezalel Smotrich, they also announced that they're shelving the legislation that is called the recruitment or the dodging the draft legislation that would have provided exemption for the ultra-Orthodox from military service. Deeply, deeply unpopular legislative proposal in Israel that is now kind of being shelved, the can kicked down the road, so that this government won't have to deal with this issue. And again, this is done in order to preserve this coalition, and to try to make sure that the elections that are coming are going to be fought around the issues and around the framing that Netanyahu will engineer or will shape, rather than this critical issue for many, many Israelis that really has to do with sharing the burden and basic equality. The idea that especially at times of national emergency, everybody should serve and everybody should carry the burden. So that is something that, if you're interested in Israeli domestic politics, you should be watching very, very carefully. Let's talk a little bit, Masua, about this issue of the pardon. And maybe you can explain to us the process and where it stands at the moment. I'm also very curious by your thoughts about how President Trump's statements in favor of a pardon for Netanyahu and against President Isaac Bushi Herzog using pretty harsh language to castigate him for not providing this pardon to Netanyahu. What do Israelis make of that?
I think that's something that I think we definitely should take a few minutes to talk, or a few moments to talk about the whole idea of this interfering with the state's sovereignty and with Israel's sovereignty, and the actual request of ministers or public officials or the public itself to do that. And we've seen Israelis asking President Biden to help, and we've seen Israeli ministers asking President Trump to actually lay sanctions over the Supreme Court Chief Justice and the Attorney General. Maybe we'll talk about that. But we just see that even the topic of sovereignty and you don't mess with another country's internal affairs have been so politicized right now that every side, whenever someone says, to the right, for example, how come you call Trump on and ask him to promote pardon, then the response would be, oh, when you did it with Biden, it was okay, but when we do it with Trump, it's not. So everything is highly, highly politicized. Now, Israeli law gives the president of Israel has a mostly symbolic, declarative position. He has one very, very important, or two, but we'll talk about one very important authority, and that is the authority of pardon. And Israeli law is talking very, very generally, very broadly about the president's authority to pardon. And now I quote, translate, and quote the law because it's important. Offenders. So he has an authority to pardon offenders and to reduce or commute sentences, and that's it. So the law does not explicitly require to know what time in the legal proceedings it's okay to ask for a pardon. We don't ask, the law doesn't ask an admission or show of remorse, nothing like that. The law itself is very, very general. But throughout the time, throughout the years in Israel, there has become a custom And the custom is number one, usually the president evaluates cases and requests for pardon only after a conviction, so after the legal proceedings have been done and ended. And also regular practice also looks at factors like taking responsibility or showing some remorse. Now, Netanyahu a few months ago sends a letter to President Herzog, does not admit anything, does not show remorse if he does not admit anything. And what he says it's the public's interest that this very divisive trial should end, and therefore I ask of you to make this trial
Right.
end,
Yeah.
to end this trial.
He
This is
doesn't.
not
Yeah. He doesn't even technically ask for a pardon.
He doesn't even technically ask for the word pardon is actually not there. So he only says use your authority to end the legal proceeding. So it's not at all clear that if it's I mean the president can only give pardons, he cannot give something else. Theoretically, according to the broad language of the law, it's not impossible. It's all based on customs and usual practice. Usually what happens with the process, the president gets a request. He transfers to a review by the pardons department at the Ministry of Justice, which gives him a legal opinion and a recommendation. He doesn't have to accept the recommendation. He has a lot of discretion on what to do. This time around, the Justice Ministry, the pardon department really stalled. I have to say it. They really, really stalled for a
Well,
long
I
time.
saw a report this morning, Masua. I don't know if you saw this as well, that the pardons department at the Department of Justice in Israel issued an opinion
Yes.
saying that Netanyahu's request does not constitute a valid pardon petition.
Yes.
That's a kind of a legalistic way of saying you didn't ask for a pardon and therefore we can't follow the necessary procedure of issuing an opinion. That's a way of stalling, right? That's essentially a way of stalling.
So first of all, they could have done that a week after the letter, and they didn't. It took months, and I'm not sure it wasn't on purpose. It didn't. I mean, I'm someone. I'm ambivalent about the whole issue of this trial, and about the whole issue of pardon. I definitely don't think it had to take so long. They could have said they could have given their recommendation and say, listen, legally, according to customs, this is not a request for pardon, and it doesn't apply, and it doesn't fulfill the characteristics and considerations for pardon. They could have done that months ago. The claim is that I don't know what's true and what not, is that the Attorney General has been stalling this. But now we'll have to see what Herzog will do. I don't think that Trump's verbal assault will be helpful in this regard. I think Herzog is in a very difficult place right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's transition to this creeping constitutional crisis that we are living with in Israel. And we've been living with this for some time. There are moments where tensions between the different branches of government, particularly the executive and the judiciary, or more accurately in the Israeli context, the legal establishment, because it also includes the Attorney General, who's a central actor in all of this. There are moments where tensions are very high, and then there are moments where it kind of recedes into the background. But in essence, we see an Israeli executive that is in open conflict with Israel's legal establishment, with both the Attorney General, Gali Baharav Miara, and the Israeli Supreme Court. We have a Minister of Justice and a Speaker of the Knesset who refuse to recognize the legitimacy of the President of the Israeli Supreme Court, Yitzhak Amit. Amit was not invited to the special Knesset occasion that hosted Prime Minister Modi from India. That created a big kerfuffle. So let me ask you what is going on, and what are the implications of this public? It's not even tension. It's sort of almost a sort of a public delegitimization of the president of the Israeli Supreme Court. How concerned are you about this? And what does this mean?
We're not creeping into a constitutional crisis. We are currently in a constitutional crisis because I'll just give you a few examples to show how to give texture to this. The event with Prime Minister Modi from India was the third or fourth occasion already that where the executive, and not only the executive, because the Speaker of the Knesset, the Speaker of the Parliament, who's from the Likud, also brought the Knesset, also the Parliament, has brought it into this war really between the branches. He's not recognized. Yitzhak Amit, the Chief Justice, is not recognized by a lot of the members in the government, chiefly the Justice Minister. I should note that Netanyahu actually do refer to Amit as the Chief Justice. It's come to this ridiculous outcome where if you ask the Justice Minister when he speaks about Justice Amit, he calls him judge. He calls him Judge Amit, not the president of the court. It has come to the ridiculous outcome, as I mentioned before. Idit Silman, who's the minister for the preservation of environment, posted in English a letter to President Trump to lever sanctions, American sanctions, over the president of the court, Yitzhak Amit, and the Attorney General Gali Barav Miaras. And that is something that is very, very, very extremely unrespect. I don't even know how to say. Now, but what is actually happening? Ever since October of 2023, the Supreme Court has only 12 out of the 15 justices, the positions of the justices filled. The Justice Minister will not commit. Oh, I don't know if you've heard this, but in the next few minutes, I might have a siren. If I have a siren, I'm going to run. So,
okay. Okay.
I'm just saying, we have an
Okay.
alert. Usually the alert is a few minutes before. Yeah, I saw it. I'm just going to come. I'm going to talk until we have a siren.
Yeah.
So we have 12 out of the 15 roles that are filled because the Justice Minister Levine will not convene the committee of the appointment of justices. We also have 100 open positions of judges throughout Israel that are not being filled because of this. So not only the Supreme Court, but also other district courts and other courts throughout Israel. Number two, the Attorney General was actually fired by the government in a process that was deemed by the Supreme Court, by her, and then by the Supreme Court as an unlawful process, because the law requires that a committee, a special committee, will give recommendations. The committee is supposed to be led by a former Justice Minister, and Yariv Levin could not find any former Justice Minister that would sit in that committee, and therefore the process was illegal. So right now we have a government which its Attorney General, they don't recognize. They say we fired her. She says you didn't fire me because it was unlawful. She's supposed to be the counsel of the government, but basically she does not represent the government in almost all of the cases. So there's also a lot of, it's you called it kerfuffle, but it's really, there is a complete disconnect between the executive and the legal system in a way that is almost impossible to function. And every single day we see one more conflict and one more conflict. We have the conflict with Ben Gvir and the police and Minister of the Police of Internal Affairs,
Itamar Ben Gvir.
Itamar Ben Gvir.
Yeah.
So it's also, so every single day we are inside, we're well within the constitutional crisis.
Yeah. So, Masua, we're mindful that you may have to run to a bomb shelter.
Yeah. In a couple of minutes or so.
And not because of the constitutional tensions. Use the word war to describe this internal conflict, which is really quite striking. But perhaps in closing, I want to ask you to talk to us about two issues. Given this situation, given these internal divisions, and it really is very difficult to describe how crazy this internal situation is, and it's driven by a government that has promised to improve governance in Israel. It ran on this platform of meshilut, of governance. And yet, we find these absurd situations in which a minister in the Israeli government is asking the president of the United States to impose sanctions upon the attorney general and president of the Supreme Court of the State of Israel. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So all of this is going to come to a head in the next elections. If the current coalition is voted in again, people will say with some great degree of justification, well, this is the choice of the Israeli public, and the alternative would be a coalition government that would be committed to trying to restore what we call mamlachtiyut, stateliness or cohesion within Israel, and will try to fix some of these fissures. From your perspective, what is at stake constitutionally in the next elections?
I think, well, first of all, yes, tremendous is at stake right now. And I think that the Constitution, even though I'm a constitutional lawyer, I think that the Constitution and the legal manifestations that we see are a symptom of something much deeper. And it is a social problem. It is a social problem of deep distrust. There's a research shows that when you research on solidarity, shows that solidarity has both horizontal and how do
Vertical.
you call this one? Vertical and
Vertical. Yeah.
vertical are based. So solidarity is based on both horizontal and vertical trust of the citizens in the state. The horizontal is between the different groups in society, and the vertical is the trust on the institutions. And what we see is that the constitutional is incredibly important, but they show that the different groups within or the different tribes, because we're acting as if we're tribes that are fighting each other, or different minorities that are fighting each other. And we see the manifestations on the constitutional, because when you have a constitution is a product of trust and a way for the different groups in society to how will we organize what are the rules of our games in order to organize our society. And that is what at stake here, I think. So it's so much deeper than the Constitution that we have not been able to write for decades, right? For 77 years, we haven't managed to do that. But what's more crucial here is that it really reflects a deep fissure, within the different tribes of society. We have we're lacking what I call a majority consciousness, meaning every group in society is walking around with a consciousness of a minority. It's my obligation as a minority is only to make sure that my interests and my needs are taken care of, and no one is taking care of the needs of everyone and is working for everyone. So yes, absolutely, the Constitution is at stake, but it tells us something much deeper about the Israeli public.
Yeah, look, I mean, you and I grew up in an Israel that was always very pluralistic.
Oh, sorry, I'm going.
You gotta
Bye.
run. Okay.
I'll be back.
Thanks, Masua. Okay. So that's the reality in Israel right now, and we experienced it. We experienced it live. I see that some of our participants have also, who are based in Israel, also had to run to the bomb shelter. We have one participant who's in Ben Gurion University in the south in Beersheba, and she had to run. Let's do the following. If anybody watching us is interested in posting a question in the Q&A queue for me, I will be happy to try to tackle it while we are waiting for Masua to come back. We may actually be out of time before Masua is able to come back. It's critically important that Israelis remain in their safe space for a good 10-15 minutes until they receive the all clear, because sometimes it takes 8 or 9 or even 10 minutes for large pieces of shrapnel to come down to earth, because these ballistic missiles are being intercepted at very, very high altitude. So I don't expect Masua to be back for the next 10 minutes at least. But if there are any questions that people want to pose to me, any comments, any requests for speakers, for future Israel Insight webinars, this is a good time to do it. Let's make lemonade out of the lemon. All right. I will give this a few more seconds to see. Okay. We have an anonymous attendee that has posted the question. We know that President Trump has not articulated a clear objective for the war, but has Prime Minister Netanyahu, has Bibi, articulated a clear objective goal for the war? So thank you for that question. Let me just make the observation that we see somewhat different or mixed statements coming out both from within the Trump administration. If you listen to President Trump, sometimes the way that he articulates the goals of the war are a little bit different from Secretary Hegseth, a little bit different from Marco Rubio. Whether that is deliberate ambiguity or whether that is not deliberate is an open question. So we have some uncertainty about the exact goals of the war from the Trump administration, but generally speaking, and then I'll link this to Israel, the goals seem to be as follows. One is that both the United States and Israel, I think today, are in full agreement that Iran cannot be permitted to have the capacity to enrich uranium on Iranian soil, not to 3% and not to 10% and not to 60%, and that Iran cannot be allowed to keep in its possession 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium at 60%, and having uranium enriched to 60% essentially leaves you within 2 weeks of a bomb, of a weapons grade uranium, which is somewhere between 97 and 99%. So both the United States and Israel agree on that goal. Both the United States and Israel agree that Iran cannot continue to have the military capabilities to launch ballistic missiles. And I think also they are now in agreement that Iran should not be able to shut down the Straits of Hormuz and disrupt 20% of global energy shipping that goes through the Straits of Hormuz. And here, I think the Iranians have made a very strong case for why that is a necessary goal. Just over the last 10 days, in the reckless way that they have attacked 12, 13 countries in the region and are now mining the Straits of Hormuz. So if this wasn't a shared goal fully before the start of this war, I think it's a shared goal right now. Where I think there's some disagreement or some ambiguity about the goals, both within Israel, but also I think within the Trump administration, and therefore between Trump and Netanyahu, has to do with this question of whether one of the goals, or perhaps the key goal of this war, should be regime change in Iran, the toppling of the Ayatollah regime, and an attempt to constitute an alternative Iranian regime that will be more pragmatic, more responsible, and hopefully more pro-democracy and Western-oriented. Historically, Israelis are very skeptical of attempted regime changes in the Middle East. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon famously warned George W. Bush not to attempt regime change in Iraq. Israelis never believed that the United States would be able to transform Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya into minimally functional democracies. But the counter-argument that Israeli strategic thinkers are making is that Iran is not Libya, and it's not Syria, and it's not Iraq. And if there is any society in the Middle East that has the socio-economic and the cultural prerequisites for successful transition to, if not a liberal democracy, then at the very least a constitutional monarchy that will be much more liberal and Western-oriented, it is Iran. And so I think this is where we are. There's skepticism, but also some hope of a successful transition of Iran to a better footing, and the prize for the United States and for Israel of an Iran that is Western-oriented, stable, economically thriving, is enormous. I mean, the fall of this regime and its replacement with something more pro-Western would be tantamount to the collapse of the Soviet Union, certainly for the Middle East, and in some respects for the wider international system. And that is a very big prize. I am in almost daily contact with Iranian friends, and they are certainly sick and tired of this regime and wish to be freed of it. So we will see where the United States and Israel land on this. I think that if we begin to see over the coming days and weeks real cracks in this regime and the emergence of signs that there may be an alternative to this regime that is more Western-oriented, then the calculus on the part of the United States and Israel may differ and may change, and we might see the United States and Israel becoming more ambitious in terms of the goal of bringing down this regime. Alternatively, there is a very good chance that the United States and Israel, or simply Donald Trump, decides that enough is enough, and that the main aims of this war have been achieved with relatively low costs for the United States, and now it's time to declare victory and go home. So I think the jury is still open on that, and we'll have to follow what is happening over the next few days. So that would be my deliberately long-winded answer to your question about the objectives of the war, similarities and differences between the United States and Israel, but also real debates that are happening within the American administration and within the Israeli security establishment. If there are any other questions, I would be more than happy to take them. I just received a WhatsApp notification from Masua telling me that she is hoping to be able to be back any minute. But if anybody has any quick questions, I'll be happy to take them. And there she is, right on time. Masua, are you back with us? No? Okay. I thought we had Masua back with us. So Larry Diamond is very kindly. Oh, here she is. She's back. Okay. How was your bomb shelter experience this time, Masua?
As always, we shared experiences about meetings stopped.
Okay. Did you go down to a public shelter? Or do you have a miklat? You have a shelter in your building?
Yeah, so we have a miklat, a bomb shelter in our building.
Okay.
Sorry, just ran up the stairs.
Yeah. Catch your breath. All good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the neighbors and people from around
Yes.
are coming to the shelter every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Masua, let's return, if you can, to the question of what is at stake in the next elections. What are the blocks that are forming ahead of the election, and what kind of coalitions do you see possibly emerging in the aftermath of the next elections?
I think that what should be interesting to watch or to follow is not necessarily whether it is Netanyahu or not Netanyahu, but what are the blocks that are going to be formed. Excuse me, I'm just closing the door. One sec. All of my family is also up from the shelter. Hold on. Camera, come on.
Camera should refocus on you.
I know. Give it a second and it'll be back, hopefully.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. What I think should be, here we go.
Yeah,
what I think is important to note is whoever will form the government, whether it will be Netanyahu or Bennett, who are basically the main contenders right now, who will they go with? Whether the ultra-Orthodox parties will be a part of this coalition, whether whether Smotrich even gets into the Knesset is not clear at all. Whether Ben Gvir will be a part of this coalition, because I and a lot of people can definitely see a possibility where the Likud is part of the coalition and is part of the government, but it will be a very different government if it is the Likud, like what we've seen now, right? The Likud with the ultra-Orthodox and the extreme right parties, or if it is the Likud with Bennett, Eisenkot, Gantz, yes, no, more center
Yeah.
right than extreme right. And I
Right.
think that's what we really, really need to focus on. And let's face it, Israel is a mostly right-wing country. So people would mostly will vote either from extreme right to center and center right. There is definitely a left in Israel, but it is not the majority. Also, a lot depends on the Arab vote or the Arab Palestinian vote, how much it will how much people will go and vote. We know that now we have a united front with the Arab parties across a lot of differences in ideology, by the way, both
Yes.
in religion wise and political wise. So this, I think, these are the things that we need to watch.
Yeah, it's a very interesting observation because when you look at public opinion polls in Israel and you ask Israelis what kind of government you want, what you've described as that second centrist alternative is what most Israelis want. They want a broad centrist, and you're right in saying centrist today means more center right coalition than in the past, because there's no doubt that the Israeli electorate has moved to the right. That shift started with the second Intifada, and it's accelerated post
Yes.
October 7th. Nothing surprising there. When people are under a constant security threat, they tend to turn to the right rather than to the left.
By the way, maybe it's important to say it is right security wise, not necessarily at all if we're talking about the relationship between religion and state, if we're talking about economically. So it's not necessarily, but right now, what is really controlling all Israeli discourse is security affairs. When we had in the last decade, we had once one election campaign that was not based on security issues, but was based on more civil, religion and state, economy issues, and Netanyahu lost that election.
Right, right. So, Masua, in closing, just given, I know that you've thought a lot about this, and I know this is a discussion and a debate that's happening again behind the scenes, mostly mostly in Hebrew, and is less accessible to international audiences. And I know that this is an area that you work on a lot at Hartman, and that is the need to emerge out of this constitutional crisis with new rules of the game, or some constitutional reforms that would at the very least set the parameters more clearly around the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branch, and really help lower the temperature on these kind of core constitutional issues. Could you, in closing, tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing and that other public lawyers and constitutional lawyers in particular are involved in right now in Israel to try to introduce reforms that would sort of end this civil war really between the different branches of the Israeli government?
So let me tell you a story about this. More than a couple of years ago, not long before October 7th, I was involved in one of the compromise initiatives. There were several compromise initiatives around the constitutional crisis. I was involved in one of them. It was incredibly easy to reach a compromise and it was not just, my camp. It was people. It was very representative of the camps that are reflective of the disagreements in Israeli society. It was pretty easy. We recommended a very thin, at first, that we did levels, a very thin basic law of legislation. I'll say a couple words about that in a second. But just for the story, after the initiative, we finished our discussion, we formed a draft, we signed it, and once the politicians entered the game, it was all ruined. And I have heard the same story from at least 3 people who were involved in different compromise initiatives, that it's not everyone agrees that a reform in the judiciary is needed. Everyone agrees that there is an imbalance between the branches. By the way, the most vulnerable branch of all is actually the parliament, the Knesset. So if we're talking about reform and rules of the game, we have to strengthen the Knesset, and we have to form, again, as we said, the rules of the game. So one aspect that was very important and was very central throughout the constitutional crisis was that of the power or overbearing of the judiciary in reviewing acts and laws, acts of the executive and laws of the Knesset, right? So for that, you need to form what are the limits on the judiciary. And at the same time, you also want to limit the executive, because you want to form a situation where it is not easy to change the Constitution or our basic laws, our dynamic Constitution. And you also want to create a situation where the review is not on everything, and there is an ability for the executive that was voted in to actually fulfill their policy. It's not that difficult once you have trust within the different groups that the other group is not trying to ruin their lives and to create an Israel that is not a place for them to live. Because our main problem right now is that everyone are reading the different recommendations or the different suggestions or the different bills, and are asking themselves, how is this bill going to be abused so that I will not feel welcomed in this country anymore? And you see this on the right, and you see this on the left, and you see this among seculars and among religious people. It's everywhere. So again, I go back to the trust, but I just want to say everyone agrees that a reform is needed. Everyone are also speaking in the name of democracy, by the way. It would be so much easier if we had one side that says we want to preserve democracy and another side that says we want to destroy democracy. But that's not the issue. We have both sides that are saying we want to preserve democracy, and you don't want to preserve democracy. It's not that complicated. I have seen so many recommendations. All of them seem, nothing's perfect, and a lot of them are reasonable. We need goodwill, we need trust, and we need the ability to say, you know what, this is solvable, and we want to solve it. Right now we're in a crisis, and a crisis is also actually a potential for growth. From brokenness, we can also move on. We need goodwill. We don't have goodwill right now.
Yeah.
On a lot of sides, by the way.
Yeah, and your point about both sides viewing themselves as the true custodians of Israeli democracy, and perhaps having different notions of what democracy is. On the right, a majoritarian perception of democracy. On the center left and the left, a more liberal, checks and balances, rule of law oriented perception of democracy. By the way, we're not the only country. Israel is not the only country that has exactly that type of debate. The debate in Poland about Polish democracy is not dissimilar from ours. But the
I'll just
stakes,
say maybe that I think that the main issue here is the question that every side is asking, what does it mean that Israel's democracy, and what does it mean that Israel's a Jewish state? What does it mean that it's a Jewish and democratic state? And then,
right?
as you said, there are different answers to that question.
Yeah. Well, Masua, you've given us a tour de force and an example of Israeli resilience. You didn't plan this, we didn't plan this, but you gave us a real life performance of life in Israel right now, and your extraordinary ability to talk about complicated and difficult issues, then to rush to a bomb shelter, and then to come back and continue exactly where you left off, is, I think, emblematic of Israeli society and the people of Israel, and it's just absolutely awe-inspiring and extraordinary. And we will continue this very, very important conversation. We will wish Israel peace abroad and peace at home. We need to make sure that we don't only win the wars outside, but that we make peace inside among us, because a house divided cannot stand for long. So this is an agenda that we will continue to follow. We'll continue to work together with the Hartman Institute. We'll continue to educate our students in trying to understand these issues and work through them. So thank you so much. I hope you have a quiet night, and I very much hope that we can meet in person in June, as we are planning to do. And we look forward to you returning to the Bay Area in the fall as well, Masua. So toda rabba, and thank you everyone for sticking with us, and take care. Bye bye.